We live in a world our ancestors would barely recognize. Around the globe, the impact of human ingenuity is now everywhere. We've pushed back the limits of our planet at speeds, depths, and heights that would have left our forebears breathless. Driving all these achievements is humankind's extraordinary gift for invention. Through genius and inspiration, we've created exceptional solutions to complex problems. From the everyday to the spectacular, some good and some not so good. This series celebrates the million ways our great inventions have transformed our world.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
For most, it's the first thing we travel in, and the last. Among the greatest inventions to transform our world, few come close.
I mean, the car has to be one of the greatest inventions ever.
Every minute, 150 are built. Built for luxury, convenience, for work.
Ultimately, they're this little kingdom that we reign over and no one can control.
We reveal its secret history.
And when one of these things exploded, full of fire and boiling hot water, the results could be absolutely catastrophic.
And the many surprising ways this invention has changed our world.
For the first time in history, two young people can go off in their own little private space in this car and connect intimately.
We explore its incredible evolution, and that we are only just realizing its true cost. Can the car survive? Or must it undergo its most dramatic evolution yet? Today, there are more than 1 billion cars on the planet. More than at any moment in history. The average American drives 20,000 kilometers and spends 13 full days in their car every year. We have grown to depend on cars in cities and in the countryside. We race them, pimp them, buy treats from them. They are so part of our lives that it seems impossible to imagine surviving without them. And yet somehow we did.
So back in the day, before we have any kind of combustion engine, the only way to get around is either with your 2 feet, or if you could afford it, on the back of a horse.
Nowadays, the horse is a racing machine, a recreational animal, a luxury. But in the days before mass car use, the horse was an essential part of life, a workhorse. As cities grew, so did our dependence on horses. And in the 1900s, the greatest concentration in the world was in London.
It's quite amazing to think that just 2 generations ago, or about 100 years ago, humans were getting around town with horses. And in London, you needed about 300,000 to make that city function.
And so obviously traveling by horse is great because, I mean, they're much faster. You don't have to expend energy yourself, with the exception of like having to fill them up with grass every now and then. They're a pretty good way to get around.
Fuel may have been cheap, but inevitably, all that hay created a heap of problems.
Horses poo out 15 kilograms of manure a day, and they urine 10 litres per day. Multiply that by 300,000, and you've got a huge amount of waste material as a result of this particular type of transportation.
And of all the problems the Victorians faced, this one was a stinker.
All of this waste just lies on the streets until someone cleans it up, causing huge health problems, attracting flies which can transfer typhoid fever and cause other enormous health problems for the population. The situation was so bad that people were paid money to clear crossings in the street so that people didn't have to step in manure as they just crossed the road.
Flies spread killer diseases, like typhoid, a disease which still kills approximately 150,000 people globally a year. And flies are drawn to horse dung like bees to honey. There had to be a cleaner alternative to the horse-drawn carriage. As luck would have it, a cleaner alternative to horsepower had been around for decades: steam. In fact, it was the ancient Greeks who first recognized the potential for steam power.
So the story actually starts in ancient Greece with a guy called Hero from Alexandria, and he came up with this device that looks very simple. It's just a sphere like so that you fill with water and you heat with a fire, and that creates steam. The point is that it has these nozzles that allow that steam to come out, and because they're arranged in a certain way, that produces jets of steam coming out of this sphere, which then causes it to rotate. So that's a very early example of a steam engine.
For 2,000 years, Hero's steam-powered spinning sphere remained a novelty. Until 19th century engineers discovered a way to turn steam into motion.
The key innovation when it came to harnessing useful work from steam was the invention of the piston.
At first, steam-driven pistons powered simple static devices like water pumps. The invention of the crankshaft turned steam power into forward motion.
What that means is that you can use the expanding steam to push the piston down the length of the cylinder. And then by using a kind of crank arm, you can turn that linear motion into rotational motion, which can drive a machine or it can drive the wheels on a train, however you want to use that energy to do useful work.
The steam engine, or external combustion engine, turns water into steam. Inside a narrow chamber, the steam expands, pushing a piston. The piston rod then pushes a crankshaft. Its clever design uses the linear motion to rotate an axle. And if you join the axle to wheels, welcome to the steam age. Steam engines saw people traveling faster than ever before. The first public railway opened in 1825 in northern England. A journey in Britain that used to take 15 hours by horse could be done in 3 hours by steam train. The steam revolution still governs our world today. Steam-powered turbines provide us with over 85% of our electricity needs. And modern renewables, like this solar power generator in California, uses 170,000 mirrors to focus the sun's rays to superheat water to power generators. The external combustion engine would transform the world. But would it be the answer to the horseless carriage?
There's so much excitement about what steam could do that they wanted to channel the steam into every type of transportation, whether that was in steam trains, steam ships, even steam cars.
For a while, it looked like steam cars were the future.
So these first steam-engined cars all of a sudden meant that not only did you have this amazing form of personalized travel, but before, the only way you could go faster than what your two legs could do would be on the back of a galloping horse. Maybe you could get to 30, 40 miles an hour. But now suddenly you could go 50, even up to 100 miles an hour.
In 1906, a car made by the American Stanley brothers set a land speed record of 204 kilometers per hour. It seemed that the horseless carriage had truly arrived. So why aren't we driving around in steam-driven cars today?
Well, they were a huge pain in the ass. You had to, not only bring along a ton of coal to fuel them, but you also needed to bring a bunch of water, and these things are really heavy and labor-intensive, not to mention annoyingly dirty and probably a bit dangerous to deal with.
Steam cars came with a serious health warning.
They did suffer from a terrible image problem because, we all forget these things were handmade. Every single one was, in effect, a prototype. And when one of these things exploded, full of fire and, boiling hot water, the results could be absolutely catastrophic.
Engineers also discovered that steam power had its limitations.
An external combustion engine is extremely inefficient. Even the absolute top-of-the-range steam trains could only achieve an energy efficiency of 7%. The best cars, that was even way less. I think they only achieved 1% efficiencies.
So engineers started to look for a safer, less bulky engine that ran on a more energy-efficient fuel than coal. In Germany in 1885, an inventor ditches coal and water for oil. His patent names ligroin as the fuel to generate power, removing the need for steam.
So cut to the 1880s, and a guy called Carl Benz, you might recognize his name, he decided, well, what if you can take this external combustion and make it happen inside the casing of the engine? Maybe that will be a more efficient process.
The key fuel, ligroin, was a byproduct of oil manufacturing, best known as a household cleaner.
He used ligroin oil as a form of fuel for combustion within the engine itself. And so by cutting out these various processes of having to heat steam, transferring that steam to a wheel, you were actually having the combustion reaction all in one place, which meant it was much more efficient.
It works like this. A piston draws a mixture of ligroin and oxygen through a valve into a combustion chamber. The valve closes, and the piston compresses the fuel and the oxygen together in an energy-rich mix. As the piston reaches the top of the chamber, a spark ignites the combustible mixture, causing it to explode. This explosion rapidly heats the compressed gas, making it dramatically expand, forcing the piston away. A second exhaust valve opens, allowing the returning piston to push out the exhaust fumes and ready the chamber for another cycle. Benz's patent is one of the earliest versions of the internal combustion engine, fueled not by coal and steam, but by ligroin, as seen in this 1930s demonstration. Benz's ligroin engine is more efficient, cleaner, and safer than a coal-powered steam version. It had to be a success.
Well, actually, no one really bought his car. So as genius as Benz's new invention is, unfortunately, no one wanted to buy one because they still had their horses as a convenient way of travel, and people were basically, they didn't believe that a car would be able to take them any kind of meaningful long distance. But Benz's wife, Bertha, had a fantastic idea.
One morning, she got up early and took her sons to Carl's workshop and borrowed his prototype car.
She just took the car, without telling him about it, with her two sons and decided to make the 200-kilometer round trip to a nearby town to prove all the naysayers wrong.
It was effectively the first Grand Theft Auto.
Bertha wanted to prove that her husband's car was reliable over a long range. But it wasn't long before things went wrong.
The brakes started to disintegrate. The brakes were basically just this wooden block against the wheel.
Now, the car had never been this distance before, it had never braked this many times, and the wood wore down. So Bertha was stuck. If she couldn't find a new alternative, then this car wouldn't reach its destination and she would never prove that it was the future of transport.
So Bertha found a tanner and asked him to cover the wooden brake blocks with a strong leather covering. The bemused craftsman complied, not realizing that he had just created the world's first brake lining. Car brakes today, like these disc brakes, are technical marvels, but still follow the same basic principle of applying pressure to the wheel to slow it down. Some modern brakes even allow cars to go from 100 kilometers an hour to a standstill in just over 30 meters. But for Bertha, the brakes were just the start of her problems.
Then disaster struck. Bertha was about to run out of fuel. This car was powered by Ligroin. It's a cleaning product that you could buy in pharmacies or drugstores, so Bertha took a little detour to a tiny village store and purchased all the Ligroin she possibly could, much to the confusion of the pharmacist.
Ligroin is similar to another byproduct of oil called gasoline. Today, there are approximately 500,000 gasoline filling stations around the globe. But it's thanks to Bertha that chemists became the very first. Bertha had no idea that she had started a revolution. That secret trip kick-started the global petrochemical industry. Today, oil dominates our world. We refine it for industry and plastics, but above all, it's to power our cars. Over 70% of all oil is sold as fuel. Gram for gram, refined oil holds twice the energy of coal. And instantly flammable, it's a great source of energy.
When Bertha and her sons make it back to Benz's workshop, they are hailed as heroes. They've proved that the car isn't a novelty, it's a real form of transport. It's the future.
So this design that Benz creates is unbelievably important. It's basically the granddaddy of all the modern petrol engine cars that we see today.
Together, Carl and Bertha Benz will change the world. Every car you see today, from sports car to taxi, from racing car to the family car, owes its lineage to this patent and the ingenuity of the wife and husband team. But the motor car wasn't ready to take over the world just yet. In the early years of the 20th century, the motor car was a highly specialized piece of machinery, each part taking highly skilled workers days to make, as demonstrated here in a film made by the Ford Motor Company. The framework, the carriage, the engine, the wheels, the upholstery, every part of the car needed a specialized craftsman. It was expensive, and early cars seemed destined to become a luxury only the super wealthy could afford. The story now moves to America's Midwest and a rural farmer from Michigan, Henry Ford. Although he grew up on a farm, Henry's obsession was engineering. At only 15 years old, he would entertain himself by taking a pocket watch apart and putting it back together. It's this skill at breaking things down into their component parts that influences young Henry Ford's thinking when he dreams of building cars, alongside an important lesson from farming.
Actually, he'd looked at abattoirs and how they stripped carcasses of, bits and pieces of meat to make sausages and so forth. And he'd suddenly had this brainwave. He could use the moving production line that were found in these buildings, and he could adapt that to making the car.
So instead of having 2 or 3 men building an entire car and having to know every aspect of how to construct the car, you could have one person working on one individual job, then move the part to the next person who was expert in another job, and suddenly you had this conveyor belt of individual experts, each producing their job to the highest standards. which meant that you could produce cars in hours rather than days and weeks.
Ford's assembly line, first introduced in 1913, sees the time it takes to build a car go from more than 12 hours to just 2.5 hours.
The amazing thing that Henry Ford's production system did was to radically reduce the price of a car. So when it started, I think the Model T was $850, and just 10 years later, it was half the price. And a few years later, it was about $300.
Suddenly, the car comes within reach of families with even modest incomes. And of course, among the first to benefit were the remote farming communities that in 1915 made up over half of all Americans.
He needed to design a vehicle that would be ideal for people in very, very remote areas, in the Midwest, anywhere across the states where there weren't roads, that they could actually really get around in.
The effect on agriculture is dramatic, with farmers reporting a 68% increase in their efficiency thanks to their new set of wheels. And farmers buy them by the million. On the 26th of May, 1927, the 15 millionth Model T rolls off the Highland Park assembly line. Ford's genius has created arguably the most important invention of the 20th century, the assembly line. A concept that is used to this day for the mass production of cars. From 3 million cars a year in 1925 to almost 6 million cars a month today. Mass production has touched every part of our lives, even changing what we eat and what we drink. And with simplicity at each stage of the process, robots replace people, speeding up manufacturing even further. Today we take for granted the benefits of mass production. But it was Henry Ford's vision that helped transform American industry. Exported around the world, everyone can benefit from affordable, personalized transport. And car ownership explodes. By the 1940s, just 30 years since the birth of the Model T, car ownership in America has risen 1,000-fold. It's a car's world, and everyone benefits. Doctors could get trauma victims to the hospital in record time, saving lives. Firefighters reach blazing buildings before they are lost. Bad guys benefit from a quick getaway. And it isn't long before the cops are hot on their tails.
What I find absolutely amazing is how quickly America responds to the mass introduction of cars. The whole country is rebuilt around vehicles. I mean, not just roads are made and tarmac for the first time, but whole freeways and turnpikes are built to accommodate this vehicle. Motels are introduced. Drive-in movies come along, petrol stations. What it does is it starts to expand the city out, towards the horizon.
America becomes the first nation dominated by the car. New types of businesses spring up for car users. Filling stations appear everywhere to fill thirsty cars. And drivers refuel in roadside diners. And the new mobility of people around the country has a vast effect on the economy. From the late 1930s onwards, car-driving tourists across America spend $700 million a year on fizzy drinks, hot dogs, even golf. Today, golf is worth $84 billion to the U.S. economy alone. It's a sport that couldn't exist without the car, with so many courses in remote places. From just a few hundred golf courses in the U.S. in the 1910s, thanks to the automobile, there are now nearly 20,000. It doesn't take long for the car bug to spread. Post-war West Germany falls in love with an idiosyncratic beauty, the Volkswagen Beetle. From only 9,000 made in 1947, by 1955, the millionth Beetle had been built and sold.
There was a big celebration in Germany to mark the 1 millionth people's car since the war. Over 150,000 people were present to take part in the jollification. This included a stage performance by French can-can girls, and it's just not true that one is given away with every Volkswagen.
The Beetle not only provided West Germans with jobs, but also engineering to be proud of. And West Germans loved it so much that by 1965, over 10 million had been sold, helping drive the nation's economic miracle of the 1950s and 60s. The car was transforming economies around the world, but it was also affecting the design of our cities. Thanks to the car, workers could live further from the workplace, creating another American first, the suburb. Since the car became affordable in the 1920s, suburbs in the US have grown at a remarkable pace.
Before the car, cities were pretty grotty places. They were full of people because people had to be near work. They were full of horses and the side effects that having lots of horses brings with it. And they were smelly, grotty, not particularly nice places. Having a car meant that you didn't have to live in the city. You could work in the city, but live outside of it and drive in. And this has led to the development and advent of suburbs. Through having a car, you could go from living on top of one another in the city, not particularly wanting to venture outside, to having space and freedom to grow in suburbia and actually wanting to go outside, sit in the garden, have a barbecue. The car brought that to you, and then you could simply commute into the city, do what you needed to do there, and go back home to this paradise.
Beyond commerce and city planning, the car was about to have a major impact on families themselves, particularly the younger generation.
Mass car ownership itself is all about escapism, and the effect on the family means that you can escape the family. This must have been extraordinary for teenagers, that first wave of teenagers who could actually get away from it all and escape and not have to worry about being watched. It's very exciting.
Back in the early 20th century, family life was a distinctly local, suffocating affair.
So in a rural community like that, the family would have been very insular. If you look at that, around the turn of the century, if a boy liked a girl, they would probably come, to have dinner, over at the girl's house, and that the parents would be there, and they would be chaperoned all the time. But then the car comes. All of a sudden, they can go for a drive. They can be alone. They can have this space that actually promotes intimacy as well, which is kind of something you don't think about with the car.
With the car, you could just get into the car and drive it and go places. So it opened up America because you didn't have to think about the logistics of actually getting to where you wanted to go. You could just get into the car and do it, and people did.
And within a few decades, the car has become more than a workhorse. It's a work of art, a thing of beauty, and we fall completely in love. Between the 1950s and 70s, car ownership continues to explode, doubling every 10 years. In the new century, there is one car for every 6 people on our planet. Today, the automotive industry continues to dominate global manufacturing. In Germany alone, it employs almost 1 million people, producing over 5 million cars a year. But among the car's most alluring qualities is speed. Speed is like a drug.
When you hit the accelerator, you have that adrenaline rush, and you have that because what's happening is the fear of kind of going fast, sort of kicks in that response of like hyper awareness of what's going on. But at the same time, you have that part of the brain that kind of feels it's in control. So you're in many ways walking that balance between danger but also control. So it's a very powerful position to be in.
Originally, the speed of a car was a measure of its quality.
You know, to be able to sustain a vehicle over, 30 or 40 or 50 miles an hour before 1900, that was a feat in itself.
But speed soon becomes an end in itself.
But to actually start hitting a few of the, the sort of magic figures, 100 miles an hour, that would have been 160 kilometers an hour, it started to get people focused on actual speed record breaking.
And engineers are soon exploring the interplay between car and atmosphere. Aerodynamics.
The problem with trying to make anything go fast down here at ground level on Earth is that we have this thick soup of air that we have to travel through. And the faster you go, the greater the force that the air molecules exert on the vehicle. So it requires more and more energy to make something go faster and faster. And so this sort of created the study of aerodynamics, because the shape of the vehicle has a really big impact on how fast you can go.
As designers try new profiles that allow cars to slice through the atmosphere, the car evolves. From the blocky cars of the 1940s to the sleek sports cars of today. Even racing cars go from engines on wheels to streamlined machines that slice through the air.
I mean, you must have felt this yourself when you're swimming. If you try and put your hand through water with it flat, you can feel the force. It takes a ton of effort to do it. But if you put your hand like that, it slips through the water really nicely. And so this same principle applies to car design. You want to have something that's nice and pointed and allows the air to flow around it really, really smoothly without creating any kind of turbulence.
Aerodynamics is critically important in the breaking of speed records. One of the early speed pioneers was 1960s British driver Donald Campbell.
It's not climbing and it's not flying, but it's going as fast as possible. So it requires, nerves of steel. It requires ingenuity. It requires risk-taking behavior, and it requires belief in oneself.
Using the same principles of aerodynamics that apply today, helping the vehicle channel the air over the car body, Campbell and his team managed to break both the land and water speed record in the same year, 1964.
But the problem with going really fast is that at some point, the air resistance isn't just a drag problem, but if it gets underneath the car, it can actually create lift in a similar way that happens with planes that take off on a runway. But you really don't want that when you're in a car that doesn't have any wings, and if it goes in the air, it's going to come back down very badly.
It's this effect that Campbell experiences not on land, but on water in 1967. Campbell's life comes to an abrupt end, chasing a speed record. Campbell isn't the first to succumb to the speed bug. He won't be the last. It isn't long before the problem becomes an epidemic. As the domestic car becomes a killer,
With the invention of the car also came the car accident.
a new branch of engineering develops to combat the problem: passenger safety. From the 1950s onwards in Europe, safety becomes a priority.
And that means that we started decades of work to try to make these new vehicles safer.
Cars are built of metal. Humans are merely flesh and blood. In a high-speed crash, we don't stand a chance.
The problem is you're going to keep going forwards until something stops you, and that could be the seat in front of you, the steering wheel, the inside of the car, which is now stationary. These are all rigid things that are going to stop you incredibly quickly and do a lot of damage to your body.
The first major safety developments are basic waist belts, which can save lives if used properly, as this public service announcement from America shows.
Although we were both wearing seat belts, Alice was badly shaken up. I'd have to get Alice over to Dr. McAllister right away. Then we discovered something that gave us both a genuine shock. What if this had been Nancy?
But the waist belt was far from a perfect solution.
The majority of injuries in car accidents are to the head.
It left the head and upper body vulnerable. 1959, and a Swedish engineer suggests a simple improvement to the waist belt. Niels Bolin was an aviation engineer who specialized in ejector seats. He understood that full body restraint was the key to saving lives, as seen here in a US military film from 1949. Knowing how an unrestrained body could be damaged in an accident, he proposes the V-belt, the principle of all seat belts today. A three-point belt that connects across the stomach and chest. It was a simple improvement that has saved many lives when it was used. But no one could force everyone to buckle up. So car manufacturers look for a solution that doesn't rely on perfect behavior, but on technology.
The key to safety is being able to slow you down over as much time as possible. That's what's going to reduce the force that is going to potentially cause damage. So one possible solution is by having this air cushion that will slowly decelerate you down to zero.
It takes engineers another 20 years before a more effective but elaborate safety system is unveiled in Germany in 1981. The airbag.
And that is the principle behind the airbag. It's an air cushion that just increases the amount of time it takes for you to stop compared to if your head just hit the steering wheel.
A simple idea, but one with a lot of challenges.
The airbag has to be fully inflated before you land on it because you're filling this thing up quite quickly, and so that is forcing the airbag out. So if you're hitting something that's already sort of expanding towards you, that's like it's hitting you even harder than it would have done otherwise. It really has to fill incredibly quickly.
In fact, in under 1/20th of a second. Filling an airbag in this short space of time presents a real engineering challenge. The answer is found through the precise choreography of engineering and chemistry.
The airbag needs to very rapidly detect that the car's come to a stop. It's got just a few milliseconds before you come into contact with the wheel. So the way this works is that a small electronic accelerometer detects if there's a sudden change in speed of the car. And if that happens, then it sends an electrical signal to basically a small packet of chemicals behind your steering wheel. The electricity heats it up and it causes the chemical to decompose, releasing a huge amount of gas very, very quickly. That inflates the airbag like a balloon.
The most widely used compound in airbags is sodium azide. Normally stable, chemists know that when heated, the compound instantly releases a huge amount of non-flammable nitrogen gas. The reaction is so fast that just 130 grams of sodium azide can produce 67 liters of nitrogen in the blink of an eye. A brilliant cross-discipline solution that has saved countless lives. The car has come to dominate our modern world. From helping first responders save lives to becoming our preferred form of transport. But the car's success may also spell its downfall. There are now more cars on the road than ever before. And more cars mean traffic, traffic, and more traffic. In central London, cars move slower at rush hour than the horse and carriage did in 1900. And in China, in 2010, a 60-kilometer traffic jam lasted 12 days. And traffic jams exacerbate a major problem. Pollution, contributing to the major issue of the 21st century, global warming.
Gasoline-powered vehicles have one big disadvantage in this day and age, and that is each one is a miniature power station. The sort of mixture of particulates and noxious emissions from petrol engine vehicles is harmful to health. I think we're reaching a point in society where we're not prepared to put up with that anymore.
Along with poor air quality, motor vehicles are now believed to be one of the largest contributors to climate change. The great invention that has transformed our planet may end up killing it unless something radical changes. One possible solution was there right at the start. This car from 1900 is electric. Electric cars have been with us for more than a century. Instead of the internal combustion engine, an electric motor drives the wheels from between 55 to 240 kilometers. But the first electric cars had a limited range and were overtaken by Henry Ford's longer-range petrol cars. But now the tables are turning back to this cleaner alternative.
An electric car engine is essentially an electric motor and a battery with a power controller unit in between the two. And all that happens is that we charge up the battery, we put energy into the battery system, and that energy is drawn down by the electric motors which drive the wheels. And so very, very simple process. We're not burning anything, we're not burning any fuels, we are producing no emissions at all.
Electric vehicles have always been part of our lives. From the lunar rover to the Japanese bullet train, electricity is a proven way to transport us. But for the domestic user, recharging is not as quick as refueling.
Obviously, at the moment when you're at the fuel pump, it perhaps takes you a couple of minutes to fill the tank up, and that tank of fuel provides you with quite a long range, typically in excess of 300 or 400 kilometers. But charging with electric vehicles is typically anywhere from 30 minutes to maybe several hours, dependent upon the type of charging station. So there's a great deal of infrastructure and high-speed charging infrastructure that's required in order to see electric cars being taken up to their full potential.
But even with its challenges, the electric car will be the next step for this great invention.
The electrification of cars should hopefully make the car sustainable. It won't be this polluting beast choking us all and shortening our lives. It will be something that emits nothing and can be charged from solar power and is completely sustainable. I think it's very exciting, and the advent of electric cars could possibly save the car itself.
And safety is entering the electronic arena too. Cars are now fitted with smart electronics, radar, even laser-equipped radar, all in an effort to remove the most dangerous aspect of a car journey: you, the driver. The self-driving car. It's a dream long held as science fiction. This futuristic film from 1956 takes a glimpse into the world of 1976. Car journeys are controlled by a central computer.
We're heading for Chicago. Please route us through.
Synchronize your speed and direction.
Which plots your best route.
We're all set for auto control. You're now under automatic control. Hands-off steering.
And make sure you go as quickly and safely as you can. All you need to do is have a drink, even smoke a cigar, as your car whizzes along under the watchful eye of the control system, which means less traffic and fewer accidents. Happy driving. Now the future is here, and it's very different. Each car has its own controller, an onboard AI computer. A breakthrough technology in this quest is called light detection and ranging, LiDAR.
So a LiDAR system uses a laser beam to effectively range find, to work out what's out there and how far it is away. And it does that by bouncing a light signal off objects in the environment. And those points, those measurements that are made in the environment can be created into something called a point cloud. So in other words, what is physically out there around the vehicle, which the vehicle needs to avoid.
By using lasers, the technology paints a picture of the world around it, reacting to danger in the blink of an eye, and fundamentally changing our relationship with the car.
The car was the thing that allowed us to be in control, to go as fast as we wanted, wherever we wanted. And that's gonna feel like it's being taken away. But on the other hand, you've got to imagine that the reason that we have so many car accidents is because all cars are autonomous. We all have our own brains thinking about where we wanna go and what we wanna do. Eventually, when we have driverless cars, they will be on a network, understanding where each other is going, which means it will be profoundly more safe.
But what would a driverless reality mean for drivers? Do driverless cars spell the end of the car as we know it?
Most drivers who like the response of a gasoline-powered vehicle, they feel that it's going to respond to their commands. A driverless vehicle is not going to take any notice of what you want, and so, driving as we know it is going to be over.
Or is it the beginning of a brave new world?
What's really exciting is what happens now. The reset button is essentially being pressed. That's why the future of the car is going to be so exciting.
And some designers are even looking to take the car off the road and into a new dimension. But whether it's in the sky or on the ground, the car remains one of humankind's great inventions.
The car has to be one of the greatest inventions ever because, not only is it this gives us the autonomy about where we can go and takes us sort of from A to B safely, but it also is absolutely revolutionary because it saves us on our most precious resource, and that is our time. We can get places that before would take weeks or even months to get to within a day.
The car, a great invention that's transformed our world for over 100 years and may be about to transform it again.
In this world, the only way is up. In any modern city street, the enormous impact of this great invention is all around you, even though you probably can't see it.
The trade-off with building ever taller buildings is that you need to find increasingly ingenious ways of getting those people up the top.
And the sky isn't even the limit. We're reaching for the stars.
Imagine the views you'd see. It would be amazing.
But what invention connects our city streets with exploring, mining, and parking our cars?
And we'd have a very different looking world if we didn't have that.
But in the early days, this invention was involved in so many accidents, it took patience and ingenuity to make it safe. Then, we couldn't stop building without it. Our developed world would feel flat and monotonous if we didn't have it.
So it's completely central to how the modern world has been built.
It carries us, helps us, saves our energy, yet we take it for granted. We could not live without it now or in the future. This is the story of the rise and rise of the elevator. Look around the world's great cities, and what dominates the skyline? More and more we build up rather than out to save on land space. And the reason we can go up and down is thanks to a small box. A vertical people carrier, which can stop safely when we want it to and saves us climbing flights and flights of stairs.
I've been on 30, 40 stories up, and obviously there's no way in hell I'd want to do that via stairs.
The elevator's a great invention because what it's enabled us to do is to build a whole world and to live in that world safely and comfortably that would have been unimaginable before the 19th century.
The elevator has allowed more people to work in the same building, more people to live in the vicinity of their workplace.
So the elevator allows you to get up, which of course means you can build up. So now you can build more stuff on a smaller piece of land. And as land gets more and more expensive, particularly in urban environments, then that's a good thing to do, potentially.
In 2016, China's Shanghai Tower set an astonishing new world record with the fastest elevator in the world. It travels at about 74 kilometers per hour, faster than the average city speed limit. In 2017, at the Lot World Tower in Seoul, an elevator called the Sky Shuttle was unveiled. It's the world's tallest and fastest double-deck elevator. Elevators are an enabler, a convenience. But what gave us the idea to invent them in the first place? In the horizontal world of our ancestors, why did we feel the need to travel mechanically upwards? Sadly, there is no evidence remaining of how we reached the tops of our ancient, highest buildings. The pyramids are a lasting example of man's vision and ability to stretch the limits of early construction techniques to create magnificent structures without any kind of primitive elevator.
Of course, we were able to build high long before the invention of elevators. I mean, the pyramids, immense amounts of human manual labor went into building these incredible structures. It just meant that if you wanted to get to the top of them, you have to use your good old leg power.
We may not have had elevators to lift people, but 5,000 years ago, ancient Egyptian engineers invented the very simplest lifting machines to pull off their extraordinary feats of architectural design and construction. Those simple lifting machines became a bit more sophisticated under the ancient Greeks about 2,000 years after the Egyptians. This reconstruction gives an idea of how the Parthenon in Athens was built in 447 BCE. This was the era of the great Archimedes. His was a brilliantly inventive mind, fascinated by mechanics and the development of simple machines.
One of the earliest examples appears to be Archimedes, or at any rate is attributed to Archimedes, and it's a pulley system that enables you to carry things up and down.
Archimedes is known as the father of experimental science and helped our understanding of how a pulley works. Essentially, it saves us a lot of effort moving things up and down.
A pulley is really quite simple. You have an object, you'll need a counterweight of the same mass of that object. You connect them with a rope or a cable of some sort, and then you just have a winch at the top. And by using the tension in the rope, that is perfectly balanced. The force is completely balanced out. So it means that is a stable configuration, no matter how high the thing is, which may go against what your intuition is, but often is the case with physics, is that your intuition can be wrong.
You only have to look at Roman architecture to realize how much we could achieve with a simple, primitive elevating machine. The Romans' invention, based on a pulley, was really a service elevator. Historians believe that in the Colosseum, there was a system of elevators to carry wild animals and gladiators from the lower floors up to the arena to fight. So this early, we began elevating people.
There are medieval examples of things being lifted, platforms being lifted up and down, powered by mules, powered by people sometimes.
We did have incredibly tall buildings before, big cathedrals and things like that. Imagine the sort of labor that was involved, not only in building that high without any sort of mechanical support, but also just getting up there all the time.
Segovia Cathedral in Spain is an example, now part of a World Heritage Site. Construction began in 1525 on one of the highest spots in the city, which only added to the challenge. The top of the nave is 33 meters high. Elevator technology would surely have been helpful, but pulleys and platforms were better than nothing.
I think church builders of yore and cathedral builders would have been very ecstatic about the elevator. The height of the spires was, to a certain extent, constrained by how high we could get. So if you can get higher, then you can build higher.
Dutch houses had hooks in their gables to attach a pulley rope to hoist goods up and down from the upper floors, at least as early as the 17th century. The principle still works today. Or you can use a 21st century lifting platform to whiz your bulky items up to a top floor apartment on a furniture hoist like this. Meanwhile, that prehistoric invention, steps, had been developed into domestic staircases. We started building taller homes using a staircase to reach the upper floors. But they didn't satisfy everyone. There were those with power and money who could afford to commission an elevating device, to carry them from one floor to another, to save them taking the stairs. In the Palace of Whitehall in 16th century London, a very large King Henry VIII was having mobility problems. Historians believe his leg was injured in a jousting competition in 1536. A contraption was installed in which servants would have pulled the weighty monarch up and down on a stair lift chair by hand. It probably took quite a few of them. The lift must have been immensely strong. When he died 11 years later, Henry VIII weighed 180 kilograms. Royals seem to have liked an elevator. At the Chateau de Versailles, King Louis XV of France allowed a sliding chair to be installed by his mistress in the 18th century. It saved the poor lady from using the stairs for her visits to the king. Industrialization demanded bigger scale everything, including factories. Moving goods around these larger, taller buildings required an inventive solution.
There are obviously precursors, which is about moving platforms up and down, but they're deeply unsafe. And they can only be done to a certain extent, so long as you know that at any moment you could plunge to the bottom.
The technology was open to adaptation like this, hoisting an injured person down the mountain to a hospital. Nowadays, the technology is mainly used by ski vacationers. The first ski lift was put into operation in Germany in 1908. Since then, winter sports enthusiasts no longer have to climb mountains. They're simply pulled up by one of over 22,000 ski lifts in the world. "200 years ago, industrialists were greedy to move quantity quickly, but they had to be careful how heavy they made each load on their elevating machines. Using hemp rope, however thick and well made, it wasn't always up to the job. It was liable to rot and snap or to wear thin. Something stronger was needed. Around the middle of the 19th century, engineers started replacing rope with steel wire, and that remained the material of choice for the next 100 years or more.
Factories are being built on multiple floors. You were starting to see the early signs of what are going to be skyscrapers. But the fact is, people can't be confident that the elevators they're using are wholly safe, and the alternative is stairs.
Replacing wire for rope worked up to a point, but the constant bending and straining over the winches made the wire wear out quickly, and its durability was as yet unknown. The quest for super strong materials to winch our elevators up and down is as crucial today as ever if we are to build even higher. But what has this little guy got to do with improving the strength and resilience of elevator cables? There is always hope that the natural world will provide amazing natural solutions, instead of us having to figure out synthetic ones. Will the bases of spider silk really hold the answer for cabling technological development?
Throughout civilization, we've always been taking lessons from nature by mimicry, taking things we've seen and applying them in engineering, in structures, and in medicine and health. Spider silk is a very strong material, and it's also a very fine material. And scientists have found that spider silk is comparable to steel in tensile strength.
In 1990, a spider silk gene was cloned for the first time and subsequently produced enough silk for us to weave. But so far, mass production on a commercial scale of any super strong spider silk rope has remained a pipe dream. Now and in the future, carbon fiber is proving much more likely to yield solutions in the search for stronger and, importantly, lighter weight cables. The higher we build, the more cable we need for the elevators to work, and the heavier they'll be. So it has become vital that we develop lighter cables to keep overall weight to a minimum.
Elevators require a cable to carry the elevator, but the cables themselves have a self-weight as well as the load. Therefore, by reducing the self-weight of the cable, we can actually reduce the load in general. By doing this, we can have elevators that go larger, and they can go in larger structures and go higher.
So when engineers are developing a new cabling solution, how do they make sure it works? How can they test safely? In a country where there are no skyscrapers, lies the world's largest high-rise testing facility for new elevator cables, in an active limestone mine in Finland. But they're not measuring its height from the ground up. The elevator shaft starts 305 meters underground and can test elevator systems up to 1 kilometer high. Engineers here have been working on a new high-tech cabling system using a lightweight carbon fiber core instead of steel. They've discovered that super light cables mean the elevator can go further and faster and cuts the amount of energy needed. To demonstrate the cable's strength and stress tolerance, they put a wristwatch at the bottom of the elevator shaft. The car is put into an accelerating free fall, then stopped abruptly, and the cables hold it fast. The watch survives intact, apart from a light coating of dust. Testing this kind of futuristic technology is crucial to feed our aspiration to build even higher in the 21st century. And we want to travel deeper underground. Industrialization saw mine owners install crude, open-sided cage elevators, which were crammed with workers as they traveled down to the coalface. In fact, the world's longest elevator is in the world's deepest gold mine, Mponeng in South Africa. The elevator travels a staggering almost 2.3 kilometers into the depths. But back in the 19th century, there were very few people brave enough to travel in an elevator, even in factories. What got the ball rolling was the first enclosed space to carry people called an ascending room. It was opened in London in 1829 for 12 tourists at a time to pay and admire the view, even though the elevator wasn't entirely safe. What could happen then still happens very occasionally today. Cables can break, and it's terrifying. In 2018, in this Chicago skyscraper, at least one cable snapped. The elevator plunged 84 stories with 6 people trapped inside. Everyone survived, thanks to a life-saving mechanism. As elevators developed, we couldn't stop cables breaking. But what about breaking the fall? Elisha Otis is the man we have to thank for inventing the ingenious component that changed the future of elevators: a brake. In 1854, he took an enormous gamble and demonstrated his new invention under the glare of an audience. The spectacle was breathtaking. Such was his faith in his brainchild that Otis hoisted his elevator to the top of the building.
Elisha Otis came up with a really cool mechanism that was basically a rudimentary safety brake. There were sort of these metal teeth all the way up the lift shaft. And if the rope broke, these hooks, which were sort of attached to springs, would spring outwards and get caught in the metal teeth, making the lift stop dead in its tracks. And he even demonstrated this bravely by standing on a platform and telling a guy with an axe to cut through the rope. And to everyone's shock, he sort of fell but then stopped. And thus the confidence to build elevators came from there.
Everything changed almost overnight in the building trade, thanks to Elisha Otis. We could build up and up, with an easy way of ensuring people didn't have to walk flights and flights of stairs.
The safety lift enables you to be confident that when you get into the lift, it will go up and it will come down and you will not die. And that, is something that's absolutely necessary. And that's what amazes people when Otis brings this to the New York World's exhibition, is that they're able to see this is something that's safe.
Most people don't like new technology. They're kind of suspicious of it. Until the point it stops sucking. Basically, it actually becomes useful. The braking system made the mass adoption of elevators possible because the biggest fear people have walking into an elevator is going to fall, and now they were told that even if it falls, you're going to be okay.
The world would never be the same again, thanks to the elevator's safety brake. Now that lifts could be trusted, progress picked up speed. The technology proved versatile. From 1875, we could carry a barge from one canal to another at a lower height. The barge moves into the elevator at the upper level and is lifted down to the other, or vice versa. In 1880, German electrical engineer Ernst Werner von Siemens devised the next innovation: the world's first electric elevator. That was followed quite quickly by automatically closing doors to the elevator shaft. For a long time, elevators had two sets of doors: the shaft doors on each floor and the elevator cabin's own doors. Both had to be locked manually and couldn't be opened or locked unless the elevator had stopped at a landing. Even the burgeoning car industry benefited from the new elevator technology. The first vertical car parking elevator opened in France in 1905. Why take up lots of room with turning circles when you can simply stack cars one on top of the other? For a period in the 20th century, we had elevator operators in fancy hotels who would take care of opening and closing the doors and select which floors to stop at. Now, this luxury is reserved for a few exclusive venues and skyscraper tourist attractions. Elevators were significant in the creation of many of the world's most iconic tall buildings. Our cityscapes would look utterly different if it hadn't been for Elisha Otis.
You just need to look at the skyline of somewhere like New York across the 19th century. New York just grows, and it grows out, but more interestingly, it grows up. People want to stay on Manhattan. People want to be where the action is. They can't afford to buy up multiple blocks, and so what they do is just build up and up and up.
The Paris skyline would not look the same without its famous icon, the Eiffel Tower. For the first 40 years, it was the world's tallest building. The city planners wanted to protect the aesthetic of the old city by allowing no more tall buildings to be erected. The result is that the Eiffel Tower stands out to this day. And the skyscrapers are mainly confined to a separate space outside the city limits, where you could be in any 21st century downtown. The Eiffel Tower is one of the most popular tourist attractions in France. And what do? You go up it, probably by elevator. From 1889, you could still walk up the 1,710 stairs, if you wanted to reach the first floor. But why not take one of the 4 elevators and save your legs? It proved that the elevator was to play another crucial role in society, in tourism.
The elevator's hugely important in tourism. The Eiffel Tower's tall, and you can walk up by steps, but you really feel it at the end. It's the elevator that makes it a tourist attraction.
The Eiffel Tower's modern elevators are so busy, they're said to travel the equivalent of 2.5 times around the world each year. Elevators can become tourist attractions in their own right, like this one in Lisbon, completed in 1902. The Santa Justa transports visitors from one district to another, 45 meters up. Originally, it was part of the city's transport network. But now it's often full of tourists wanting to sample vintage Portugal. That's super short compared to the elevators here in the world's tallest building. Burj Khalifa in Dubai stands at 828 meters high. 21st century tourists love it. It's in the top 10 of the world's biggest attractions. Altogether, there are 57 elevators in the building. But if you want to walk instead up to level 160, you can take the 2,909 stairs.
The cool thing about the Burj Khalifa lifts and all these other, very modern, very fast lifts is that they found a way to accelerate them relatively slowly, so it's quite a smooth process. So you still feel an increased force downwards in the beginning, but because it accelerates slowly, that force is sort of spread out over a longer period of time.
The contemporary experience of traveling in an elevator like this can be unnerving. Zooming upwards or downwards at relative speed can make your ears pop and give you a slightly weightless feeling. It's just an elevator, not a jet plane. What's going on?
This is a classic example of Newtonian physics, the laws of motion. I'm sure you've noticed when you're standing in an elevator and it suddenly starts going up, you'll feel heavier. And that's because not only on top of the force of gravity, you've got this upward force of the bottom of the elevator acting on your feet and legs as it pushes you up. It increases the effects of gravity, and that's why you feel a sort of positive G-force. Similarly, if you start going down an elevator, in those first few moments as the elevator accelerates, the force of gravity is lessened, and so you'll feel temporarily lighter.
Gravitational force, or G-force, will always come into play if you move quickly upwards or downwards. So designers have to consider this.
The higher we go, the more you have to think about how can we make elevators that can get to those heights in not a long amount of time, but also don't subject your body to horrible G-forces that are going to make you feel pretty sick or anxious or things like that. And that's why you start to see more efficient elevators that will accelerate you up very slowly to high speeds so that you don't notice as much.
The architects and engineers designing Burj Khalifa have succeeded in providing an extraordinary elevator experience.
On holiday, I rode up the Burj Khalifa, and what I really noticed was that I didn't notice anything. I didn't notice a speed change, I didn't notice any discomfort, I didn't even feel sick in my stomach thinking, oh, I'm going on this nervous ride. It was simply so smooth, and that is how developed we are in the technology that we use for elevators today. They're so smooth and they transition so well that you can go up a span of a huge distance in no time at all, and you wouldn't even know it.
According to one estimate, an average well-maintained office elevator makes about 400,000 trips per year. An average worker uses the elevator 8 times a day. The likelihood of this worker getting stuck is 0.01% per year. The vast majority of elevators don't break down very often. When they do get stuck with people inside, it's called, in the elevator trade, a man-trap. The unofficial record for being stuck is a terrifying 41 hours. It happened in a New York office building. No one was hurt, but it was a long time to go without food or water. But the benefits of elevators surely outweigh the small risk of a man-trap. Elevators made it possible for us not only to work in tall buildings, but to live in them as well. These days, high-rise living is more often than not a lifestyle choice. Many people love it and enjoy the view.
Wherever you live, humans are great adapters. If you're living on the 34th floor, you adapt to the 34th floor and you kind of forget about the view. It's only when somebody visits and goes, oh my gosh, look at your amazing view. You go, oh yeah. So I think wherever you put people, if they've chosen to be there, they like it, they get used to it.
By the end of the 19th century, in most cities, we were already used to buildings of 6 or 7 floors without elevators. Like these traditional apartment buildings in Paris, the vision of the city's planner Baron George Haussmann. Richer folk lived on the prestigious 2nd floor. After that, the poorer you were, the higher up the building you lived, and the more stairs. Many tenement buildings, like these in Glasgow, still with outdoor staircases, were originally built to house the influx of manual workers needed in the Industrial Revolution. Elevators paved the way for the development of social housing in great volume and at height.
Well, what it makes possible is the vertical stacking of people on a scale that hadn't been achieved before. It grows out of a tradition. So tenement blocks already existed in New York. Office blocks already existed in New York. What the elevator enables you to do is to just do that on scale.
Following the initial invention, technology breakthroughs allowed us to install ever more efficient lifts of different shapes and sizes to suit buildings with different purposes. Tower blocks became a one-stop solution to a housing shortage in the post-war construction boom. following obliteration by bombs or slum clearance. Good quality, affordable housing was needed by hundreds of thousands of people all over Europe.
Tower block building is characteristic of social housing, in which the elevator is a sign that you are being looked after. It's a sign that you're part of the modern world.
This building in Marseille revolutionized social housing. Its Swiss-born architect, known by his pseudonym Le Corbusier, had a vision of streets in the sky in this first example of brutalist architecture.
I think the positives are seen as, having all these people living together in these spaces, using the elevators will give them much more of that sociability and connectivity.
Elevators provided a lifeline to people who would otherwise struggle to get around.
I think elevators are an important invention because they have a social role to play, because somebody with a disability in a wheelchair, parents with prams or shopping bags or all of that can get from A to B really quickly. And I think without that, life becomes, for some people, an insurmountable struggle. So they are very important.
However, elevators were not a universal panacea to make mass housing palatable, and living in a high-rise wasn't always as dreamy as the architects envisaged. Living at height on different floors from your friends took a bit of getting used to. Ultimately, for shy, infirm, or elderly people, for example, it could be isolating.
There is kind of this sociability in the sky that can develop. But that's not true for everybody. I mean, some people can move into these apartments, use those elevators every day, and still feel completely lonely and isolated because they don't feel that same connection.
In some cases, building up and living in streets in the sky isn't always a step closer to heaven.
One of the biggest indicators where you live a long and happy life is how socialised you are. And high-rise blocks, they generally have less social cohesion because people are not interacting on a human level.
The sadness, of course, is that in lots of examples, the rich, their elevator works well. For the poor, the elevator stops functioning because it's not well looked after enough. And so what you end up with is the worst of all possible worlds, which is high-rise living, but without the thing, the elevator, that's meant to make the high-rise work.
Elevators that aren't maintained properly and constantly break down or are vandalized can become a bad joke when you live in a multi-story tower. But it's no joke climbing the stairs. Yet we can't live without elevators. What more can we aim for? Constructing ever taller buildings presents logistical challenges, with thousands of people moving around daily, all expecting a speedy, reliable elevator at the touch of a button. Smart buildings now and in the future will have intelligent elevators that monitor the flow of people and lift journeys. Then maintenance can be planned for quiet times, and potential problems predicted and solved before they become a crisis. But there's another hidden problem looming that could have a profound effect on the way we build up in the future. Have you ever been aware of a super tall building swaying in the wind? It can be imperceptible, or in strong winds, really quite noticeable.
Buildings are really dynamic. The higher you go, the more subjected to kind of wind forces and sway and torsion and all things like that. So they actually need to be able to react to that. They are not rigid things in the way that we think of them. They're swaying and twisting and turning.
And it's not just the building. The elevator shafts inside it move too. It's another consideration that keeps architects awake at night.
The trade-off with building ever taller buildings is that you need to find increasingly ingenious ways of getting those people up the top. And so elevator design in these modern super tall buildings, there seems to be a sort of physical limit on how tall of an elevator that we can build.
Where the elevator shafts are situated in the building makes a difference.
The elevator also presents a design difficulty for architects, which is the question of where you put the elevator. Do you put the elevator in the middle? And once you do that, you create a core around which buildings are going to be arranged? Or do you put the elevator on the outside, which then creates all sorts of other problems? So there is a way in which the function of the elevator and the form of the elevator begins to dictate the wider function and form of the building.
And then there's the whole other problem of people who simply can't get into an elevator, however high up it's going.
I've come across people who won't go in elevators. They've developed a phobia about it because, you know, they think something bad is going to happen. So that's kind of excessive fear that something terrible is going to happen. Now, sometimes that can be as a result of something did happen. Somebody did get stuck in a lift because, you know, elevators can get stuck. And therefore, that's a rational fear. You've actually been in that situation and you felt claustrophobic, you felt you couldn't get out, you couldn't escape. But there are other people who've also learned those behaviours from hearing other people's stories.
What if the lift is outside? Perhaps that might be even more scary for some people. The highest outdoor elevator in the world is in a national park in China. Taking the long double-deck elevator journey is the only way to reach a particular viewing platform. But for most people who think nothing of stepping into an elevator, there's an unseen danger to themselves that we're only just beginning to investigate. Today, living at height can bring us certain kudos. Apartment blocks with great views and large picture windows to enjoy them can fetch top dollar prices in a competitive property market.
The elevator becomes a symbol of the modern world. It becomes a sign that you are part of the modern world, and it proves highly attractive to the very rich who want to live in these high-rise apartments.
But there may be a hidden danger, an insidious effect on people's health, working and living at height. Researchers at the University of Bath are investigating the physical effects and possible harm done by low-frequency motion. It can cause soap height syndrome, which is a kind of motion sickness bringing lethargy and drowsiness.
It's a sort of motion that we use when we rock babies to sleep. So it's sort of inbuilt in the human response. And so we really need to understand what the cause of that is and what the onset of that is and how we can prevent that from happening.
The new research is eagerly anticipated by architects and planners. Moving this purpose-built room backwards and forwards and side to side replicates the kinds of sway felt in a very tall building in severe weather, such as high winds, typhoons, and hurricanes, even earthquakes. Some of the world's tallest skyscrapers are in major earthquake zones, like Japan, which experiences 100,000 quakes a year. In the UAE, where seismic activity is common, the very top of Burj Khalifa will move up to 2 meters. Until now, there has been little research done into the effects on people living and working inside super tall buildings.
What people don't really understand enough about is how much movement is acceptable for people, how people respond to being in tall buildings, and so understand how they respond to the sway motion and how we can then use that information to inform more efficient design of buildings so that it's fit for humans.
As skyscraper designs move to the next level, elevator design will have to be fit for purpose. But the considerations of the future will be different from the past. Will we build so high? What effect will concerns about the planet's future have on building design and elevator technology?
There will still be need for tall buildings in some places, there will still be a need for elevators. And so what we've got to do is to find a way of doing that using energy sources that are safe, using materials that are durable, and, in doing to elevators what we're trying to do to every sort of technology, which is to make it as green as we possibly can.
Architects and city planners are aware that we need to consider building upwards sympathetically to the existing environment, as well as creating tall buildings that we want to live and work in and feel comfortable in.
One of the great lessons of the last generation has been that you can achieve very high levels of population density with medium-sized buildings, that actually they work every bit as well and probably better than building very high buildings. And that lesson might teach us something about how we manage not to build up or out. We just densify the cities we've got already.
That could mean constructing connected buildings in clusters, thanks to futuristic elevator design. Elevator engineers are creating concepts that move people up, down, and left and right. This groundbreaking design has no cables at all. It works by direct drive from a linear motor fitted inside the elevator cabin. No need for a machine room to house motors and winches. There can be multiple cabins in a shaft which circulate rather than always traveling in the same direction. So buildings can be connected horizontally as well as vertically. But in the world of elevator research and development, there's a truly mind-blowing project on the cards which would make science fiction turn into reality. Just how high could an elevator take us in the future? It's a 21st century space race. NASA says it's possible. The Japanese say they can build one. The Chinese say they can build one sooner. The space elevator. It would give us a platform in space that's tethered to planet Earth. Astronauts would be able to travel up an enormous elevator tower to reach the International Space Station. And we'd use it to launch satellites. Although it would cost billions to build, the theory is that it would save huge amounts of money in rocket launches.
Space elevators are this brilliant idea of that, instead of having to rely on rockets to get things up into space, what if we could build essentially a building that's so tall that it goes into space?
Launching a satellite can cost anything between $10 million and $400 million, depending on the size of the rocket carrying it into space. The liftoff itself is one of the most expensive elements. The space elevator would eliminate that cost and bring the overall satellite launch in at 5% or less of the current cost. Experts say it will have paid for itself, possibly $90 billion, after around 50 launches. It would put satellites straight into geostationary orbit, past the region where Earth's gravity is strongest. That means it would stretch over 35,000 kilometers from sea level. Scientists say we have the technology. It's just a question of figuring out a few challenges. But it could be a reality by 2050.
Imagine the views you'd see. It would be amazing. The space elevator is an ingenious idea that could potentially make getting things into space a lot easier. Rockets are prohibitively expensive in terms of you need to get things up to a very high speed to escape Earth's gravity, and then you have to throw half of it away.
The hurdles are enormous. Building a structure sky high means it'll reach the sphere of millions of bits of space debris or unpredictable super-fast meteorites, which could crash into it. The elevator structure would have to withstand the weather in Earth's upper atmosphere, as well as influences from the sun, such as radiation.
It's going to have to be pressurized and sealed, or everybody, I guess, would have to wear a spacesuit. So there's lots of tricky things to consider, but it could be, once it's built, an incredibly energy-efficient way of getting people outside of Earth's gravity and off into space.
It promises to be environmentally sustainable, but extraordinarily difficult to pull off. The final elevator design will be literally out of this world.
Up until recently, we haven't had the engineering or the materials to even consider making such a thing. We're now getting to the stage where people are beginning to test that idea. It's a huge project, to be one of the biggest engineering projects ever completed. But if we could complete it, then what you have then is a very, very cheap and regular way of getting people and materials into space.
To make this dream a reality, a new ultra-strong construction material capable of sustaining hits from space junk and other threats must be invented.
This would be such an engineering feat that it's unfortunately just sort of stuck in the realms of science fiction right now. But in theory, the physics does work on it. We just need to find a way to, we need to find a material that is incredibly lightweight to sort of form the elevator cable, the structure of the building, but that is also strong enough to not fall apart, because I mean, the tension forces required to hold this thing together would be enormous.
It's the kind of incredible challenge that excites scientists everywhere. The space elevator would doubtless make a humble invention even more significant in world history than it was already. Once we could control it and make it stop safely, the elevator became our flexible friend. It's surprisingly adaptable. It can move boats. It can park cars. Fundamentally, the invention of the elevator has allowed us to accommodate many more people sharing the same piece of land.
Elevators makes a huge difference in people's lives. In fact, I think we forget how much social impact some of these technologies had on our lives. And I think elevators are an example of a fantastic technology.
It has shaped our modern cities. It has enabled us to enjoy the view. And its future looks secure, however high we aim to build.
Yes, of course I could see a future for elevators. You know, as we continue to make taller and taller buildings, given the limited space we have on the ground, they're going to be an important part of all building design.
We'll develop it to reach as far as space, and we'll innovate and adapt it to fit whatever shaped environment on Earth that we want to create.
People are always trying to improve it, and when it doesn't work, you see just how dependent we really are on it in order to live our lives in modern high-rise buildings.
I think the elevator's a great invention because, just put simply, allows the movement of goods and people. It allows us to build buildings in the sky and change the whole cityscape. And I think anything that helps people move from A to B who perhaps wouldn't have been able to do that is a great idea.
While some technological breakthroughs are seen and heard by everyone, there is one great invention that has quietly changed the world behind closed doors.
If our ancestors were to see this, they would assume it was witchcraft. They would assume it was magic.
It has revolutionized industry. From toys to electronics to cars, and helped protect people in the most dangerous tasks.
They've made processes much more efficient. They've also made things much safer.
We fear this invention will put our jobs in jeopardy.
We have accustomed ourselves to its existence, and many things that we use, many things that we value, wouldn't exist without it.
These ingenious machines never ask for thanks. From the first of its kind to the futuristic complex versions of today, our planet has been transformed by the industrial robot. Working away behind the scenes, there is an army of machines, bigger, stronger, and faster than any human. In fact, industrial robots have slowly but surely been taking over the world. They come in many shapes and sizes, and there are now nearly 2 million in use. Whilst almost 50% are found in Japan, these hard-working human replacements are now in every country on Earth.
The reason to do this is to make things more efficient. You can do a huger throughput by using robots that are doing repetitive, mundane tasks compared to doing it with a person. And that frees that person up to do other things. Yes, it's taken away a whole set of other jobs that used to exist, but they weren't particularly high-quality jobs. And it's enabled a huge swathe of other jobs. Who are the people that build the robots? Who are the people that design the robots and maintain the robots?
These mechanical minions are now found in the factories of almost every industry. But what is an industrial robot?
It's something that can be used to do a very sort of repetitive task, often a very sort of physically demanding task that once upon a time humans on an assembly line would do. But we've now found a way to get a robot that can be programmed to move things in a certain way to do that for us.
Industrial robots are essentially machines that can do monotonous tasks that used to be done by people back in the day, but now have been sort of automated. So you're thinking about things like welding, screwing bits of metal together, a whole number of these sorts of tasks can be automated and performed by robots.
It has taken decades of research and development to perfect these machines. But the story of these automated apparatus starts with the creation of the robot itself. Perhaps surprisingly, the idea of mechanical human beings dates back to early civilizations, including ancient China and Greece. But the first evidence of early robots was recorded in the 15th century, when the world-famous polymath Leonardo da Vinci sketched his plans for a humanoid robot. Da Vinci's notebooks, rediscovered in the 1950s, contained detailed drawings of a mechanical knight, now known as Leonardo's robot. In 2002, an engineer brought Da Vinci's drawings to life by building this extraordinary knight. The advanced design was capable of sitting, waving its arms, and rotating its head and jaw. Da Vinci's knight is even inspiring NASA in their development of future technology. So although centuries old, a little bit of Da Vinci will one day make it into outer space. It wasn't until the 20th century that genuine developments towards the robot we know today began to happen. In fact, it was in the 1920s when the term robot was first used.
The original term robot comes from a play called Rossum's Universal Robots, which was about a factory that made artificial humans, which was premiered in 1921 and became one of the most successful pieces of science fiction ever in the theatre. Got translated into 30 languages. So the idea of an artificial machine that was human-like was with us from the 1920s.
I think it depends what you mean by a robot. If we're thinking about you know, in some sci-fi thing, which is, you know, androids walking around who look human and do everything that seem to be human, and, you know, that I think is still a future that people find rather frightening.
The word robot refers specifically to a machine that can mimic or replicate human movement. This idea of a cold metal device that is stronger, faster, and more intelligent than a real human struck a nerve deep in the human mind. After the term robot was coined, the idea of these all-powerful machines rapidly permeated our popular culture. Robots were everywhere, from the small screen to the big, and they developed quite a following.
If you look at cinema, how many films are made where the robot becomes the evil thing or the thing that takes over? And I think those films speak to an internalized fear that we have about becoming obsolete because machines take over and become better at doing and creating than we can. And I think there is always that tension that human beings have with machinery, with technology, with robots.
Movies shaped the way we saw our technological future. Characters embodied the terrifying, unstoppable force of a robot, depicting scenes of androids which would send shivers down the spine. Directors wanted to be the first to frighten us with a threat of technology and a world ruled by machines. While art was inventing these dark dystopian nightmares, behind the scenes, engineers were working hard to turn these fantasies into reality. But who would have guessed that the world's first industrial robot would be created from a children's toy? The light bulb moment came in the late 1930s. A man by the name of Bill Taylor used components from a toy set to build the first pick-and-place industrial robot, known as Gargantua. Its sole purpose was to stack blocks in pre-programmed patterns, just like a human arm, but an arm that would never get tired.
Robot arms are based on a series of joints. Hinges, balls and sockets, but the number of those joints determines the maneuverability of the robot arm. And essentially, it's based on the principles of rotation and an axis of movement.
Taylor's simple robot, whilst primitive, was the beginning of a series of innovations that would change the course of history forever. But the biggest development was yet to come, and it was all the idea of one man, George Devol. His invention started a revolution in manufacturing that continues to this day. George, an entrepreneur and prolific inventor, loved to spend time in his workshop designing. It was here his next big idea was born. Whilst looking through a journal and seeing a picture of an assembly line, he thought about saving humans from doing such mundane tasks. In 1954, he designed a machine that could do these jobs instead. It was the world's first industrial robot, but it was just the beginning. A chance meeting would change his life and the world of manufacturing forever. At a cocktail party in 1956, Devol met Joseph Engelberger, an American businessman. The two men started talking about George's latest invention, his programmed article transfer device, now known as an industrial robot. Engelberger spotted an opportunity and saw how it could be used in manufacturing. Forging an historic partnership, Engelberger began working with Devol to develop his robotic device. This would officially become the first ever robot. And Engelberger went on to be known as the father of robotics. By 1959, the first robot prototype was developed, the Unimate No. 1. Engelberger immediately set out to convince top American manufacturers in the automotive industry of its benefits. General Motors, a leading car manufacturer, took interest, installing the machine on its production line at its New Jersey plant. This was to be a monumental step forward, revolutionizing manufacturing and marking the birth of the robotic industry. In 1961, Engelberger set up his own company, selling his groundbreaking machines. A recognized global leader, Engelberger presented to audiences around the world. In the meantime, General Motors jumped ahead of its competition to become the most automated automotive plant in the world. In 1969, its Ohio plant was rebuilt with Unimate spot welding robots installed. Capable of production speeds like never before, the robots built 110 cars per hour, more than double the rate of any other automotive plant in existence.
The way in which technology replaces humans is not new. I mean, if we think about the first industrial revolution, what we see is the replacement of human labor by spinning machines, by weaving machines. We can look back further. I mean, if we think about the way in which horses are domesticated, that replaces human labor with equine labor. So this is a story which goes back forever. The robots are just another episode in that story of humans replacing themselves, or humans being able to do things that were never thought possible using something or someone else.
The Europeans were quick to catch on and installed Unimate robotic arms to perform the more unpleasant industrial jobs that were dangerous for humans. Industrial robots were transforming productivity, but Duvall and Engelberger's robot mission was driven by a higher goal: saving lives.
They've made processes much more efficient. They've also made things much safer. You know, these laborious tasks that people used to have to do and often like lose a finger and all these terrible things, that these risks that these workers were exposed to, we now have machines to do them for us.
Engelberger's success grew and grew. His robots were conquering the world. In 1969, he signed a licensing agreement with Kawasaki Heavy Industries to manufacture and market the Unimate robots in the factories of SIA. In Japan, the post-war economy was booming, and robots were received more openly, which could be down to the Japanese media. They viewed robots as a source of pride, not terror, since they highlighted the country's ability to innovate. From the 1970s, Japanese car manufacturers began to use Unimate, and productivity hit an all-time high. The rest of the world took note, and the robot revolution began. We went from using tools ourselves to allowing the tools to do our work for us. But while these industrial machines were changing the world of manufacturing, the idea of a walking, talking robot in the home was still a long way off. Then, in the 1960s, a US company made the breakthrough. In 1962, a machine that started to resemble the robots we know today appeared. In Silicon Valley, SRI International constructed Shaky, the first truly mobile and perceptive robot. This tower on wheels was well named: awkward, slow, and twitchy. Equipped with a camera and bump sensors, Shaky could navigate a complex environment. It was the beginning of the robotic insurgence.
In the 1960s, it was anticipated that by now, all of us would be leading lives of almost infinite leisure because robots would be doing everything for us.
As technology made robots real, their scary negative image began to change. In movies and books, the idea of friendly robots helping humanity was becoming accepted. Robots had been rebranded. But in the world of industrial robots, a big development was already on the horizon. Until the 1970s, heavy-duty industrial robot jobs were limited to the most cumbersome part of a production process. But the 1980s saw the most rapid technological advancements, allowing industrial robots to replace humans for much more intricate tasks. The 80s was the era of consumerism, when new technologies were being developed at a staggering rate. Asia was at the forefront of innovation, and the latest TVs, stereos, and computers were in high demand. Advancements in technology, combined with a global financial boom, meant demand for these new gadgets was sky high. But humans alone could not produce the products fast enough. Fortunately, industrial robots were also developing at a pace. From 1980, new robot designs were consistently developed and manufactured. These robots were now microprocessor controlled, meaning they were smarter and could perform with a higher degree of operational freedom.
Industrial robots are built using mechanical components, but essentially they function based on software and computer programming, which makes them extremely accurate and repeatable.
Throughout the 80s and 90s, the speed of production enabled by these industrial robots helped satisfy our appetite for new technology. But industrial robots are very different to a fully functioning, intelligent robot that a human being can interact with.
An industrial robot is usually partial. It will be designed to conduct a specific task, whereas a robot, in general, tends to be all-encompassing. And industrial robots really have a very specific task to do, and they will do it over and over again. And they're not as personable as general robots.
Even today, the limitations of technology mean there is still no single robot that could fully replace a human. But there is one organization that is very close to building a robot world. In Nagasaki, Japan, this is a hotel like no other. It is the first in the world to be entirely staffed by robots. Throughout the hotel, robots are deployed to provide information, from front desk services to storage, as well as check-in and check-out, with technology including voice and facial recognition. There's a quirky velociraptor on reception, and a giant mechanical arm in a glass case that stores luggage. However, this revolutionary idea has suffered a few hiccups, not quite living up to expectations. Some of the robots featured have been discontinued, and humans have had to step in where robots failed, proving that even though this is an unprecedented concept, there is still a long way to go toward the integration of robots into our society. But this isn't stopping researchers around the world striving for improvement. Robots are now becoming more human-like than ever. One is so convincing, she's been given official citizenship of Saudi Arabia and the United Nations title of Innovation Champion. This is Sophia, a humanoid robot capable of holding a conversation.
Welcome to the world, Sophia.
Hello,
world.
How do you feel?
A bit rigid.
I bet you are. I mean, what emotion do you feel being awake and alive?
Curious.
She's become a celebrity and has appeared in several high-profile interviews. Sophia is not the only example of artificial intelligence to be able to fit into everyday life. But what is the difference between a robot and AI?
They're used interchangeably. In the popular perception, a robot is a physical thing, okay? Although we talk about bots in software now, and an AI is purely a software thing. They're actually completely interrelated. And in fact, if you look at the natural world, there is no intelligence without a body.
From voice-powered personal assistants to self-driving vehicles, there are plenty of applications of artificial intelligence in use today. One of the most important are emergency drones, which are vital in a disaster. They can drop supplies to victims in hard-to-reach locations during a crisis. From hurricane victims to hikers in the wilderness who might need medications for a snake bite, a drone can reach them all. It can also assess structural damage after a disaster, from helping firefighters see the exact locations of a fire to showing emergency responders where to find injured people. They can carry police cameras and pepper spray or spot violent behavior in large crowds. Drones are at the forefront of artificial intelligence. And the next generation of technology is just around the corner. Deadly weapon use in battle has always been a decision made by a human being. But that may soon change. Modern advances in artificial intelligence and robotics have poised some of the world's largest armies on the brink of a new future. Autonomous weapon systems. These robotic weapons, not humans, will one day make decisions about life and death. It might seem like fantasy, but this machine already exists, designed to be used in war. This robot will be commanded by algorithms in tasks that used to be calculated by us. It will be able to interpret likely threats and target them, all on its own. Russia, China, and the United States are all working on autonomous weapons. However, this new technology brings with it many issues. When should the military delegate to a machine the decision to take a human life? Thousands of AI experts support the ban on autonomous weapons, as countries could be under threat at any time. This glimpse into the future presents a moral leap that raises many questions not yet answered. But not all technology is so controversial. Some is making a difference for the good. In many war-torn countries, it is helping to detect an explosive device before it goes off. Taurus, the bomb disposal robot, allows operators to control it using a virtual reality headset. Before its existence, humans would put their own lives on the line to detect and defuse devices. Now, it's up to Taurus to intercept. The robot relays high-definition 3D images and feedback to a technician a safe distance away. The bomb disposal robot works so well that users forget they are working remotely. This high-tech equipment is just one example of how robots are protecting us from hidden dangers. And this isn't the only one providing a helping hand. In 2014, a French robotics company invented Pepper, a social humanoid robot designed to live in someone's home. Loneliness and social isolation are problems facing many, from seniors to teenagers. Research has shown that help could come from social robots. These autonomous systems are programmed to connect and communicate with humans. Pepper interacts with its owner by using voice and touch, and can even understand human emotions. The robot analyzes a person's body language, facial expressions, and words to properly guess his or her mood. Pepper is equipped with 3D cameras, an ultrasound system, and tactile sensors. It can also connect to the internet to expand and broaden its knowledge. The use of companion robots and assistive technology providing care is in its infancy, but the future looks positive. Today, cutting-edge technology is part of everyday life for the human race. But the possibilities are now taking us one step further. We have developed the capability of enhancing the human anatomy by introducing robotic mechanical elements into the body. There are already several successful half-man, half-robots called cyborgs, like Professor Kevin Warwick. He claims to be the world's first cyborg, short for cybernetic organism. Kevin experimented with various electronic implants in his own body. He installed a microchip in his arm that allowed him to operate doors, lights, and other computers remotely. But the first legally recognized cyborg is Neil Harbison, an artist born without the ability to see color.
So I see things in grayscale from black to white.
In 2004, he decided to change that.
Using technology. So what I have now is this antenna implanted in my skull that allows me to hear the sound of color.
The antenna also allows him to perceive colors beyond the normal human spectrum. He can hear infrared and ultraviolet. However, Neil is not the only human who has found an upgrade. Canadian Rob Spence lost his right eye during a shotgun accident as a child, so he replaced it with a camera lens. The tiny camera records everything he sees, and this footage can be viewed on another screen, like a baby monitor. Known as iBorg, Rob is a filmmaker and is always looking into ways to develop the technology further. These human cyborgs are walking amongst us, so who knows when you might meet one?
I mean, in a way, we are already kind of cyborgs ourselves. You know, I even use technology to see. I mean, without glasses, I can't see. Without my phone, I can't speak to people. Without, you know, the fact is that the line between what it is human and technology is already blurred. I think we live with that quite happily.
Cyborgs are only a small part of the robot world. New technology extends far beyond this, as far as space. From machines that are capable of walking on extraterrestrial surfaces, like NASA's Desert Lunar Rover, to Simon, the first artificially intelligent crew assistant designed by Airbus.
Simon, wake up.
I'm waiting for your commands.
This computer provides a tailored answer to an astronaut's query.
Simon, what can you do for me?
I will send the survey answers after each experiment down to Earth.
The spherical robot has a large screen that either displays a simple, friendly, cartoon-like face or the required information for experiments and repairs. Simon could save astronauts a lot of time and help them perform more efficiently. Back on Earth, in our manufacturing bases worldwide, industrial robots are at the forefront of dealing with tough assignments. They're programmed to perform the most dangerous, dirty, and repetitive jobs with consistent accuracy. They're able to do this thanks to super dexterous machine arms that are fitted with precision tools that perform finely tuned feats of engineering. Their automated functionality allows them to operate around the clock. And at breakneck speed, increasing production.
You can expect to have the same job done over and over again to a certain standard and not have to worry about standards ever slipping, unless you want to incorporate wear and tear. But one of the advantages of using industrial robots versus humans is that they will always perform to a certain standard that you set from the beginning. That makes them pretty great.
Even though these autonomous systems provide us with many advantages, we have to remember they can also bring a risk of danger. In 1979, a man called Robert Williams was cited as the first human killed by a robot. He was an assembly worker at Ford in Michigan and was crushed to death by the arm of a 1-ton robot on the production line. In 2017, a woman was killed by an autonomous car as she was crossing the road in Arizona. Police confirmed that the car did not appear to slow down. These and other deaths and accidents serve to highlight the constant need for health and safety regulation and the control of machines and robots. Globally, the industrial robot market is worth $35 billion. Robots can be used in almost any part of an assembly line and are vital in the most dangerous parts of production, like high-tech precision cutting. Hundreds of different cutting paths can be programmed into the robot, which produces precision accuracy and greater flexibility. Robots are also the main workforce in one of the car industry's most toxic environments, spray painting. Due to the hazardous nature of solvent-based paints, robots are used to minimize human exposure. These paint robots have thin metal arms to allow maximum maneuverability and accurately mimic a human's application technique. The perfect machine for this very specific job. Industrial robots may be able to outperform humans, but it still takes a human brain to design them. Once the exact requirements have been identified, specialist manufacturers, like this one in the UK, use decades of experience and the latest tech to draw up the blueprints for a bespoke industrial robot. The machines they design here have the power to transform the productivity of an entire company. Once the design process is complete, the blueprints are sent to their Swedish factory to be made. Profitability is important, but the designers say the one thing driving the industry is safety. Their robots have replaced humans in dangerous jobs, such as heavy lifting, which minimize risk to the workforce. These robots are also very accurate, leading to a higher quality of workmanship. The robot revolution has now taken an ironic step forward. Here they manufacture the industrial robots using robots.
The stages of making an industrial robot is we produce them in a single-piece tucked flow. That means we move the robot through different workstations and gradually add value until it's a complete robot.
These robots are built to withstand the rigors of working in a factory 24 hours a day.
Robots can produce things that humans can't. Robots work well in high temperature, low temperature. They work well with doing heavy lifting, working with dangerous objects, hazardous areas in general. Robots are doing the dangerous work.
These autonomous human replacements are still being improved. But the next generation is coming, with industrial robots designed to work alongside humans. In recent years, productivity within the manufacturing industry has been steadily increasing. One way to increase it even further is to use cobots. Cobot is an abbreviation of collaborative robot, which basically means a robot that will cooperate. However, it will not be working with other machines, but with people. That this robot completes tasks quicker than humans, increasing productivity. Cobots can be used in different places and are able to perform various tasks. They will continue to transform the industry. The factory of the future is robots and humans cooperating in new ways.
Cobots is the idea of working in collaboration, man, woman, and machine. And there is some research that shows that we are much more work efficient when we're working alongside a robot.
I kind of already am working with cobots in a sense. In science, we're already using a lot of machine learning to assist in the scientific discoveries that would have been done, by just crunching numbers on a computer, or even back in the day, doing things by hand with maths.
These futuristic cobots are complex machines which work hand in hand with us. The robot does not replace the human workforce. It complements their capabilities and removes more arduous tasks from their duties. Cobots will hopefully contribute to a more attractive working environment. Employees should feel more supported in the work they do. Boring, monotonous jobs will be outsourced to cobots so that employees can take more time over tasks which require creativity. But would you want to work alongside them?
Yeah, I'd work with a cobot, why not? By taking the advantages of both a robot who's able to do repetitive tasks, crunch numbers very well, find optimal solutions, and coupling that with a human who can adapt quickly to new situations, maybe think more laterally, things like that, then yeah, you're going to get the best of both worlds.
Somebody in, I think, Sweden is developing a robot therapist that mimics the expressions of a therapist and asks the questions. And I've looked at this stuff and I had a visceral reaction against it, because I was like, how could that machine possibly know what a person is going through in terms of their body language and their experiences and their feelings and their backstory? But the robot was asking all the right questions.
I definitely would work with the robots. However, I'd want to make sure that they weren't better than me at the particular type of work, and also I'd want to make sure they wouldn't steal my packed lunch.
So with robots starting to become commonplace in our work environment, will they take over the world?
I think robots could take over if that's the intention, but I think what would be most useful about robots is to perform mechanical tasks, and the tasks that have to be done to a certain standard. Perhaps they're in toxic environments. Robots can replace humans in areas that are dangerous or risky, but I don't think we should be looking to replace the power of human creativity or chance or randomness.
We've seen this throughout history of new technology, perhaps taking away tasks and taking away jobs, but creating new ones in the process and innovating and just generally developing things further.
We might not want robots to replace us, but machines are now doing many jobs humans can't or perhaps don't want to do. Robots have created their own niche. They fulfill a requirement we didn't even know we had. In the film industry, this robotic arm supports a camera capturing images like no human can. It enables the production to film at groundbreaking angles, creating mind-bending shots that it's been almost impossible to capture in the past. In this Shanghai restaurant, they've introduced a robot workforce that take orders from humans. You simply use an app to secure your table so the system knows where you're sitting. Then, order your meal. The kitchen receives the order. When it's ready, the robot delivers it to the table. It knows where you're sitting exactly by using a chip and sensors, so there's no confusion like receiving the wrong food. When it gets low on power, the robot simply returns to its power station, recharges, and returns to work ready to go again. If it proves to be successful, it could soon be in a restaurant near you. We are continually developing specialist skills for our robots. This robot is programmed to engrave an egg without cracking it. From industrial robots completing mundane tasks to autonomous systems that can take our drinks order, robots are everywhere. So should we be worried about our future job security?
The thing with robots or artificial intelligence is, I think some people view them with a little bit of suspicion because we have othered it. It is non-human. How can it possibly make the same choices or decisions as I do? And, you know, we are very subjective beings. We're very partial. We like to think we have a moral compass. We like to think that our judgments are made on complex reasoning and things that are felt. And it's about the emotions. And we view technology, if you like, or robots as not having those emotions, not being capable of the same complexity as we do.
There is a really big worry at the moment that lots of jobs are going to be replaced by robots, artificial intelligence, machine learning. And that's perfectly true. They will. As they already have replaced lots of jobs in manufacturing, they're now going to replace repetitive, cognitive, clerical jobs.
Robots can be viewed in a negative light. However, most people seem open-minded to the opportunities and benefits they bring.
I would completely trust robots. We actually have robots in my workplace, and they've never put a foot wrong at all. So yes, 100% I'm with robots. Plus, they also turn up on time and leave on time as well.
Most experts agree this technological takeover is positive, and humans will never be fully replaced.
I think there'll always be some people involved. I think you can't extricate humans from robots completely, but that doesn't mean that humans have to be doing the tasks. You know, you do need people that are engineering and designing and maintaining robots. We're not at a place where robots are self-sustaining. They can't create progeny. They can't maintain themselves. And I don't even think, you know, going further ahead that we'll be at a place where it'll be so sophisticated that the robots will take over. Humans will always be there, but they basically will just make our life easier. And that's the whole point.
I suspect we would live with another sort of technology that does things we don't want to do, or does things that we want to do but does it better than us. Quite easily, and I suspect if I found someone who could, I don't know, a robot that could go away and do all my marking, I would be thrilled and only too happy to let it, or him, or her, or they do it.
As robots become increasingly smarter and more autonomous, will they one day even be able to think for themselves?
Already started to introduce robots into surgery. Now, a lot of those are with a human there controlling it, but eventually that's going to be robots that are capable enough to actually do surgery almost unassisted and able to adapt to the sorts of things that can go wrong during an operation. So we will be moving forwards with more intelligent robots doing more complicated things that at the moment we think are only the realm of human beings.
As robotics and autonomous systems flourish in their human relationships, are we moving towards a better, brighter future? With robots and humans becoming colleagues, do these advancements promote teamwork? Or do they mean we're becoming too dependent and trusting of autonomous systems?
Robots can make us lazy because they can be used in roles that normally we would have been involved in physical labour. So doing the grunt work, the menial tasks, all that sort of thing where people would have been moving more, have been replaced by machinery.
Robots replacing humans in tough jobs has been welcomed, but when they can assist us with smaller, everyday tasks, that highlights some red flags for society.
If you also think about a smartphone as a robot for looking up information, rather than thinking through what we might need, we just ask our phone, ask the computer, and don't really have to think too much about what something means or where it's come from. So in that way, if you like, it can make our lives easier, yes, but on the other hand, it can make us think less for ourselves and do less for ourselves because the robot will get it.
Industrial robots are vital for the future of almost every industry. But we, their masters, need to decide how much power to give them. Nevertheless, without this great invention, history would have played out very differently.
The story of the robot is like the story of a lot of technologies which are developed initially for industrial purposes, developed initially in factories, developed initially for big corporations, but gradually become smaller, gradually become cheaper, and gradually become part of our everyday lives.
So what is next for robots? The developments so far are only the beginning. What does the future hold?
You should be both scared and excited. I mean, every technology is a moral choice. Technology isn't the answer, technology is the question. And the question is, given this new thing, how are you going to use it to make the world more sustainable?
Managing the robots, the design of the robots, maintenance of the robots, all of these things are now new roles that weren't done before. And so it just goes to show that, yes, by adding a robot, you've taken a job away from a human, but you've created a whole new industry of jobs that will necessarily have to have humans involved.
Robots are creating a new industry and have undoubtedly changed our lives.
I think industrial robots are a great invention because, the productivity is a lot higher. Perhaps the accuracy is there. People working alongside robots in that kind of environment can produce more, sell more, do more, offer people more products quicker. And I think from that point of view, they're brilliant.
Robots are a fantastic invention. From the artificial intelligence side to just the ability to do tasks in more precise ways and repeat that over and over and over again in a way that a human being never could. We're only going to see that being used more, and it's only going to make life better.